it allows us to see the hand more thoroughly, because there's a huge difference between just holding a barbell and then on your fingertips, fingers together, fingers splayed, thumbs coming together, pinching things. There's different muscles working together. And it's those unique opportunities that I think we can take from rock climbing to be more comprehensive with our grip training.
Hey everybody, I'm your host, Anthony Renna. Welcome to episode 420 of the Strength Coach Podcast. We're talking about relevant topics with top coaches in the industry to help you become a better trainer, strength coach, therapist, or business owner. We're brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Lots of education going on up at the Perform Better Functional Institute in Rhode Island. They have a cool little gym area and lecture area, and they kind of can go back and forth. So they do a lot of workshops up there. Got a speaker school coming up, movement workshop, and a business workshop, all up at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute in Rhode Island. Guys, when you're looking for equipment, they do have a digital catalog on their website, so you don't have to worry about if you don't have the catalog that they send in the mail. You can go on the digital catalog just like going through the regular one. It's pretty cool. And don't forget, there's always something on sale at Perform Better. There's a little sale button right up top. Check out what's on sale now at performbetter.com. All right, today I have on Collin McGee. He's the fitness director at the Alliance Fitness Center in Reading, Pennsylvania. He's also a Camp 4 human performance rock climbing coach. And the foundation of our conversation is really going to be grip training and how training for the grip translates to other sports besides rock climbing. That's how the whole kind of our conversation kind of started behind the scenes. We actually got on the phone one time, just talk a lot about it. And then I decided, yeah, this would be a great topic for everybody. I think it was, we're going to go deep into it, like kind of what's missing with grip training in most programs. Even if your sport isn't grip heavy, the assessment that he does and how to incorporate some of the training without overwhelming the program. We'll talk about that and so much more. And this was a really fun interview for me because I feel like we were able, to look outside the box of typical sports training. So I thought it was pretty interesting. Guys, don't forget September 18th, 4:00 Eastern, Kevin Carr, Brendan Weirick from Certified Functional Strength Coach, and Mark Fisher from the Business for Unicorns. We're going to be doing a webinar. It's free. It's called The Missing Piece, Consistently Excellent Training Sessions. A couple episodes ago, Mark kind of did a whole thing about the missing piece, but this is going to go even deeper with the boys from Certified Functional Strength Coach. Again, it's free. We'll have a link in the show notes. And you can also check out businessforunicorns.com. They have a ton of free resources there. Guys, for the Nomly Maximizing the Member Experience segment, Sumit Seth is going to discuss 3 levers to look at when you're stuck, when you're hitting plateaus in your business and you kind of can't figure out, how do I get out of this? Those levers that he's going to talk about are people, process, and product. And he's going to go over each one to help you analyze where you might be able to improve to get out of the mud. So great one coming up from Sumit. So check it out.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Nomly's Maximizing the Member Experience segment with your co-host, Sumit Seth, the co-founder of Nomly. Today, I'm here in Flagstaff, high country north of Phoenix, 2 hours drive up north for a founders retreat. And I'm surrounded by a lot of founders from different walks of businesses, different industries. And we're all here trying to work on our business and understand what can we do to move forward. And I just got off a very, very interesting conversation with a bunch of founders. And it just came down to when we're providing that experience or you're doing sales or what have you, you're doing all of this so that your business can thrive. But have you ever had that situation where you're stuck? No matter what you do, you just don't seem to move forward. You've kind of hit this growth ceiling, and do what you may, you seem to be just hovering around that. You're providing the best experience. You're showing up for your clients. You are checking in on them. You're doing everything under your power to do the best you can, and yet you go back and you look at the numbers and you're like, holy moly, we are stuck. I mean, I'm hovering around that mark, and no matter what happens, I'm on this hamster on a wheel kind of thing. I get 2 people in, I lose 2 people, I get another person in, then I lose that person. And there's going to be natural attrition, but it's like, what do I do? So we started going down that path, and this really great conversation I had, and I just had to record the segment and share it with you all. And it just came down to 3 levers. There are 3 very, very important levers that you need to look at anytime you find yourself being stuck. Lever number 1 is people. Team building is company building, folks. You built this business to grow, and your business, you're being in a service business, it will not happen till you're not surrounded by more smart people, more hardworking people, and not people that are like you. That's a big mistake we make. We want to fill the roles that we have with the characteristics that are needed to succeed in that role. So find the attributes that are needed for each position, and then bring that person in and hire that person, because as founders, as entrepreneurs, we have this tendency to bring people on that are very much like us. And we think if we were just 5 of us, the company would be a totally different place. Well, no kidding. It might be a shit show if that happens, because then if you're all doing the same thing, it's not going to work. The best teams are the ones that commingle, collaborate, support each other, there's some level of overlap, but for the most part, you're supplementing, you're complementing each other. So that's the number 1 lever, which is people. Invest in your people. The second lever is process. Now, you might have the best people, but if you don't have well-defined processes, then the consistent experience will not be there. The consistent experience for sales, consistent experience for member experience, consistent experience for your staff, it just won't be there. And consistency is what you're shooting for. That's what you want. So people and process. Now, mind you, I've not said systems. Systems is a subset of processes. You may have different systems to work your processes, but the bigger point being, have you got well-defined, documented processes to be followed by anybody, any of the people that you bring on board? But you're always iterating on it based off of new changing environment, regulations, new ways of doing things. And then the third, which we take pretty much for granted, all of us, is the product. So people, process, and product. The product is the actual thing that you sell, the value that you provide, for which you get paid. And you want to make sure that is a kick-ass product that you are providing to your community, and they're getting results from it. Now, the results could be anything. It could be weight loss in a fitness setting. It could be fat loss. Look at the vocabulary here, the semantics. It matters. When someone starts out, when I started out, for me, it was about weight and energy, and then it became body fat, and now it becomes track and go, calorific deficit and all that. So what I'm getting at is know your product. Now, once you have these people, process, product, those are the 3 levers. It's one of those 3 levers that is stuck, and that is what you need to unpack, open up, and decide where you want to focus on, because that's the one thing that's holding you back. It might be all of them, but you want to be closest to the money and say, which one of these do I first work on that would move the needle for me and get me unstuck so I can break through this growth ceiling that I am hitting. Now, mind you, if you get all these 3 right and they start working in harmony, and there's this next P that you guys will all love, which is profitability. When you have the right people, the right process, right product, profitability is going to happen. Of course, you need to be mindful about another P. Now I'm on a roll. Pricing. The pricing depends upon the product that you have, the people you have, and the process you have, and the people that you serve. But okay, not too complicated. Step back. People, process, product. Get those 3 right, and find yourself shattering and the growth ceiling that you've come across, and get unstuck. Well, that's it for me, your host, Sumit Seth, the co-founder of Anomaly, and I hope you have a wonderful time. If there's some other stuff that comes to mind, I would love to hear about that. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Now I have on Collin McGee. He's the fitness director at the Alliance Fitness Center in Reading, Pennsylvania. He is a Camp 4 human performance rock climbing strength coach. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. And he played baseball at Cornell, so Division I baseball, which I always love. I think if you listen to this podcast, you know I love getting some, like, really somebody who's played a sport at a high level who's now working with athletes. I think it's always it translates a little bit better. He's CFSC. Again, kind of speak in that same language. And I do want to say before I welcome him, is one thing is, this is the good part about social media, is that Collin would maybe listen to the podcast and then comment. And then, so I kind of knew who he was, and then he messaged me, and I didn't get back to him for a while. I meant to, but I didn't get back to him for a while because it was really intrigued me. Because when he started talking about rock climbing and the grip strength and how it translates to other sports, I was like, I just was kind of going through some other things and all over the map at the time. But then I got back to him, and here we are. So Collin, thanks for doing this, bro.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, this is like a really fun full circle moment. I've been a CFSC, level 1, level 2 for the longest time. I love, Kevin and Stig and Pat, all these guys have been, Mike, obviously too, have been mentors and role models for me for the longest time. And yeah, kind of, let's see, like a long story short, I played baseball forever, was fortunate enough to go to, Ivy League university because of it. Got hurt a lot. So every athlete's, unfortunate story. I have a UCL injury, your classic Tommy John. Didn't get the surgery, but had the injury. Meniscus torn on my left knee like 3 or 4 times, once or twice on my right knee, slipped disc, broken wrist, tendonitis in my hands, labrum on my right, rotator cuff on my left, blah, blah, blah. So things didn't go so well for me for baseball. Afterwards, though, I loved the weight room. Like, that was my favorite place to be, getting stronger, the camaraderie, the energy. And so naturally I gravitated towards that, especially because biomedical engineering didn't necessarily work out either. So I got involved with a bunch of other mentors, getting me into personal training. I had a family friend that was coaching athletes, and then I got into it right there, got thrown in. And one of the golfing TV series we were going to do, my coach at the time was like, hey, look up Mike Boyle. He does this really well. And then kind of like the rest is history, took a CFSC and was like, whoa, this is amazing. After doing that, the little void in my heart that needed to get filled after baseball was not there was starting to open up a little bit. And I hired a coach to work with us, and she did rock climbing for obstacle course racing training, because rock climbers are pretty dang good at that. Went to the gym with them one day, fell in love, started scrolling on Instagram all about this, and then found Tyler, who is the C4HP. And then that's kind of how this all came about. So again, my day job is I'm a personal trainer, strength coach for the Alliance Fitness Center, Reading, Pennsylvania. And I work primarily with field hockey, lacrosse, baseball, track and field, things like that. And then your general population. Locally, I tend to be known as like the field hockey guy. I don't know anything about field hockey or the sport or the rules. There's too many whistles. That's all I know about it. But I think it speaks to the fact, I remember like a Mike Boyle quote for a while, or some adaptation, where sometimes the coach that doesn't have the history in the sport becomes a really good coach for it, because you can see more clearly and objectively. And I think that's also why we're doing a really good job in the climbing sphere too, because Tyler Nelson as well, the head of C4HP, he was a baseball player in college too. He didn't start climbing until he was like 25 or something like that. So we come into this field that is super new. It is a baby in infancy. And if you look at the research and what people are doing, it's pretty evident. And so it's helping us see a little bit more clearly about rock climbing when people get hurt training, and we don't as easily get sucked into maybe some traditional things, which may or may not be good. There's always a diamond in the rough, but we don't want to blindly follow what we've always been doing, because someone in the 1975 was doing it as well and just happened to be good. So that's kind of like the long story short about how I came into the rock climbing sphere. And the cool part why I reached out is I realized how much of the CFSC is just perfect for rock climbers. I was talking to some coaches about this too. You go in your coaching career, you get a few certifications and you get this like nice shiny new hammer. And you start swinging it everywhere. And then you take another certification and then another one. And all of a sudden you're like, this is great. The next thing's great. But come full circle, I'm probably doing this, 9 or 10 years now. So I'm still a baby too. But you realize how good the CFSC really is. The fundamental principles of movements, push and pull and simplicity. And you always kind of come back to that. So thank you, Mike, and everyone for being so right all the time. But and in the climbing world, we just slowly kind of add in the climbing things. So the fingers, the climbing on the wall, their unique practice. But at the end of the day, like the recipe is so simple. And that's what we're trying to educate the climbing community on is how do we do the climber things, but also how do we get strong, push, pull, legs, healthy, longevity, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike always talks about like that's the argument against, sports specificity, right? It's 80-20, and Mike will even say no. I think he thinks it's 90-10. It's 90% is the same. It's that 10% that you might want to, add in. So whether that's even, and it's funny because we had a long controversy like right now that's going on as we record this. The latest episode was Coach Boyle saying athletes shouldn't train like bodybuilders. So there's a bunch of things happening on that front, right? And so I think when you look at these things, are there some bodybuilding principles that are good? Yeah, I'm sure. And maybe it's timing, young kids, or maybe it's a phase, right? In the off season, somebody needs to get a little bigger, depending on the sport. Maybe it's a position, right? So I think, to your point, that's a lot of what when you look at the sport specific argument, and going back to what you said about not like you never played field hockey, and Mike always said he never played ice hockey. Greg Rose had a great quote about that. What they were finding was the best golf teachers never played at the super high level, because what he was saying was they found they had one path to get there, their path, right? And so when they would go to teach, they would kind of go back to that path. To your point again, this is how I did it, so follow me. So I think sometimes that doesn't always translate to teaching. So
yeah, you can't think out of the box. I think there's a good book called Range. I forget the author, but it talks about sports specificity and like the Tiger Woods effect, and how if you're 3 years old, you give him a golf club, he's going to be a world champion. But there's many, many more other examples of multi-sport athletes excelling greatly in one. And it focuses on the point of motor learning and skill acquisition. And another cool experiment they reference were like a group of virologists, I think it was like 5 virologists versus a group of 1 virologist and an engineer, a carpenter, and blah, blah, blah. That other group with a more diverse background in jobs fixed and solved the virology problem faster than the group of virologists. And it goes to that point where if you're tunnel vision, you're only going to know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. And so having multi-sport background for an athlete is fantastic for skill acquisition and performance. You have more solutions to problems, but as a coach, you have also more solutions to problems when it comes to teaching and learning and growing and developing. And you're not biased to, like you said, what you once did, like the old high school football coach, up, down, burpee. Well, we won state championships back to back. This must be good. Okay.
Exactly.
Sure.
Well,
sounds good.
That was a great book. I think it might have been David Epstein. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Was it Epstein? Yeah. Like, and I often think about that actually, because he was talking about being a generalist versus specificity. But then it's in order to be a better specialist, it's good to be a generalist first. And then I think we need to weave in and out of the general because it's good to kind of get out of that box, right? And then come back in, and then get out, and then come back in. So good stuff. Well, like I said, the thing I was really interested in going through some tennis elbow, like I said, I hate to call it that. It's hockey elbow. But this grip idea too. And I was also, because of the Ninja, I have a client who owns a gymnastics company, and they actually are now kind of getting into the ninja space. So they have an area where they're starting to do that. And it sort of, and I've done some OCRs, obstacle course racing, and it sort of make me think about, the importance of grip. But the thing about grip is when I was looking at your videos, I'm like, okay, yeah, we need to define grip, because a lot of people like, oh, let me get my grip trainers and get them out, or I can get enough grip from my deadlifts and pull-ups. Which is just not true from the perspective of when we're really trying to utilize that. For the average person, 100%, we know that grip strength relates to longevity, but it doesn't mean get the grip strength trainers out. It just means it's a product because you probably were doing something active and moving your whole life and you have a strong grip. Okay, great. Rock climbing training can really translate to other sports, and that there's, the grip training in other sports is missing some key aspects. So define grip training. Like, what do you talk? Like, how far do you go when you're looking at, hey, we need to get this grip stronger, and we need to start working on this for like a rock climber. Let's start with the extreme.
Sure. And I think I first had my aha moment when I had my first day rock climbing, coming off of a long and collegiate baseball background. I was walking lunges with 110-pound dumbbells per hand. I was doing the forearm roller thingy, the rice buckets, and all of these things. I go to rock climb one day on the easiest stuff in the world, and I cannot open up my hands or my elbows the next day. I was like, I thought I had grip. I thought I had all this stuff I was doing. And so I think traditionally grip training can just revolve around like you're grasping something. So you're just holding a dumbbell, you're holding a barbell, you're shaking someone's hand. But in the climbing world, what gets illuminated is the nuance of the rest of the fingers. And so in the traditional sense, I think if you imagine that you're holding a dumbbell and you're wrapping your hand around it, the pressure kind of stays underneath maybe the knocking knuckle, which is our PIP joint. And we use a lot of the hand and maybe a little bit of the finger realistically. In climbing, the hand opens up and now our fingertips right underneath the nail are holding on to small little edges, and now we have to use strength that makes sense for that to be able to hold on it and not fall off. And what that does is just it changes the ratio of muscles and tendons being used. It makes some tendons more involved than others as compared to holding a dumbbell. And so it allows us to see the hand more thoroughly, because there's a huge difference between just holding a barbell and then on your fingertips, fingers together, fingers splayed, thumbs coming together, pinching things. There's different muscles and everything working together. And it's those unique opportunities that I think we can take from rock climbing to be more comprehensive with our grip training. Like I said, it's probably only the 10% of everything. I wouldn't skip your squats and just start doing your fingers. But I think bringing in that nuance help us in that 10%, maybe write better programs to be more comprehensively strong, because your sports, you don't have to be a rock climber to need this stuff. If you're playing football and you have to go out and grab someone by the jersey and bring them down. Jiu-Jitsu has a lot of cool studies coming out about trying to understand like generalized grip. So if they were just doing a seated row versus grabbing onto the actual gi and then pulling it, they compared different strengths between that to see like who was better, a professional versus like a regular student just studying it. And it's coming out that all these things are going to be really useful, and knowing how to take advantage of that and maximize that specific finger strength is going to be really helpful for the health of these athletes, not doing random stuff and doing too much, but also the performance, because you're going to be doing it right and it's going to end up translating a little better.
Yeah. So fingers, you're going to focus on those fingers. What about forearms? And then I was telling you earlier too, like this shoulder idea, like Gray Cook would always talk about irradiation and say, look, strong grips is strong body, right? As well. And so like there's a lot of shoulder involvement in that piece. So can you just talk about going up the chain a little bit and how much when you're thinking about that grip, And I know obviously you're doing the other 80 to 90%. So we're going to have a strong back and strong shoulders and, working on the chest, et cetera, those total body movements, push, pull, et cetera. But how much are you thinking when you're specifically thinking about grip going up the chain?
I think it starts with kind of maybe our assessment that allows us to see if it's necessary or if it's going to be part of the plan. So how we assess our climbers is we'll have a force gauge that is attached. So it's a really fancy food weighing scale that will tell you how much force is going through this. And so there's a couple companies to work with. There's it's called Tendon from Norway, and then Forceboard from Pitch Deck is actually a Utah, US company, both really great companies. And so we'll attach like a handle to it, and we'll pull down on this handle. And that number is going to be really reflective of how much the larger muscle groups are getting involved. That should be the highest number we see out of our athletes because the biggest muscles are involved. Then what we'll do is take away the handle and bring in the climber base thing. So if you can imagine a little ledge that is maybe 1.5 inches or so wide. Basically, it covers just enough for that first joint to sit there comfortably. We're going to grip onto that. The fingers maybe make a 90-degree angle, and we're going to pull down on that. Because we can't wrap our entire hand, we only have the limiting factor of the fingertips, we should get a smaller number just because they're not as big and strong. And so we get number 2.
But there's still contribution from the bigger muscles.
Correct. Yeah, because the bigger muscles are pulling down on it, and the fingers are just resisting being opened, which is an important new nuance that we kind of really started to talk about. And there's a third test where we basically will hold on to the same little ledge with our fingertips and just kind of squeeze it. Imagine like shaking someone's hand. There isn't a ton of range of motion happening, but we're squeezing it. That number is actually going to be smaller. And so what we're trying to find is large muscle group strength, finger tolerance, and then muscular finger strength. And when we look at those numbers, we want to, again, see the big, medium, little. But what happens is we sometimes see the same across the board, or one is bigger than not. And that allows us to say, hey, for example, if that big muscle group number is the same as your fingers, like, this is kind of interesting. That will tend to happen in our youth athletes that are just coming into the scene, or someone who is inexperienced with training, because all they do is just climb on their fingers and they haven't been exposed to weightlifting. Or it is someone that is maybe coming off of an injury or doesn't have the upper body strength to actually pull on it. So that allows us to say, hey, we want to start to backfill in these numbers, because we're not necessarily chasing a perfect strength to weight ratio or a predicted milestone, but we want to see the large muscles have large muscle strength, and we want to see the fingers have their relative contribution too. When it comes to like connecting the chain and stuff, I think that's probably the part that we attack it from, is just making sure that the numbers look good enough. I'm not too worried about finding a particular connection point, because when we train the hand comprehensively and then we train the shoulder and the large muscles comprehensively, it all kind of comes out in the wash really nicely too. So it's kind of finding out what is their weak link, how can we identify it, and then now how do we implement programming to make that get a little better.
Excellent. So yeah, that just made me think about, if there is an injury to the hand, which I know in rock climbing there's probably a ton, then it might be saying, look, we did these tests. For example, Titleist has a power, three power tests. One where you do a vertical jump, and then another one where you're on a chair and you throw like an 8-pound medicine ball as far as you can. And another one where you're kind of doing a sit up and throwing it overhead. Now, believe it or not, that like the average tour, it's 22, 22, 22. So 22-inch vertical jump, a 22-foot throw, 22-foot throw. So out of those three, if you start to see like vertical jump is 16, and then the other two are like 22, 24. Now you're saying we're not getting enough contribution from the lower body. So that's where we need to attack. So it reminded me of that, where, hey, here's an injury. They're not getting any contribution from these larger muscles. We need to make sure they understand the larger muscles need to play into this as well. Am I right on that?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
And when we see that, it also kind of comes with, oh, I'm not good at X, Y, and Z. And all of these situational deficits might be really steep climbing, things where they have to make a dynamic or powerful move, or they're doing things in the climber, we call them shouldery moves, but they're just a little bit more physical, and they get hurt often. And then we go and test them, and we see these numbers kind of so close together. We're like, well, your large muscle shoulder stuff isn't really bigger than the fingers. It's telling me you just use your fingers a lot. And
Yeah.
these people tend to not work out specifically for the upper body, or they climb a lot only. And what we use this as education too is, generalized strength training. We need to be somewhere in that 70 or 80% of minimum of max. That allows the body to say, oh, good enough challenge, I get stronger. But when you're climbing on your fingers, and then ideally, if you're climbing well, your feet are on the wall, it's always super sub body weight, which is the goal of climbing. You want to be as easy on your body as possible. That's not good for strength training, especially for large muscle groups that need heavy weight. So it's a really nice educational point for us too. Be like, cool. This told me that you don't lift a lot or you climb a lot. That's great. But look at how you're exposing your body physically. We want more coming from other resources, i.e. off the wall, the weight room. That way we can bump these numbers up, give you a better, healthy, more robust body. I throw you back on the wall and you have more fun and you don't get hurt as much. And it really helps us educate and teach that direction too.
Yeah, and it just reminds me again of like a runner, or like I'll use hockey just because I like hockey. And
Sure.
so it's Coach Boyle used to talk about not doing the slide board in season, for example, right? They're getting enough of that already. We don't need to run, like a lot of the talk right now is with this idea about when, like, for example, zone 2, they're getting enough of X amount in practice, this type of training, this type of, cardiovascular work in practice. So let's not worry about that in the gym. So we're kind of filling those buckets, right? A big Mike Boyle, analogy. So how would you, from that perspective, when you're looking at training some of these climbers, I would think, you know what? They get a lot of grip training already. We're not worried about that as much anyway, because they're doing that in their sport. So is that how you're kind of approaching it?
Yeah, it does have parallels. And yeah, Kevin Carr did a really, really good talk on that cardio which was really nice and illuminating. Great studies there. But we think the same way. So it goes back to now looking at the fingers from this like overhead pulling version and then the squeezing version. And so when people climb a lot, they are getting a lot of what the wall will give them. It depends on the experience level and the ability of the climber. So someone who's really, really new, they're using like bigger things. So it might look like a handle or something you can wrap your hand around. Really good climbers that are climbing hard grades are climbing on really, really small things. Imagine stacking like 3 or 4 credit cards together. That's what they're holding on to.
Yeah.
And so that when you're on the wall doing those things, what you're getting is a lot of the overhead style where your fingers are just kind of like holding on as minimal as possible because you're trying to perform and be efficient. The fingers are doing crazy different things. And so what we want to say is like, hey, you're on the wall a lot, you're climbing a lot. When we are off the wall, let's not do the same things. So let's not do the super small stuff all the time. Let's not do the hanging, what we will term as a eccentric, like yielding isometric a lot. Let's try and do the things that you don't get on the wall as easily. Let's find training devices that make the hand really comfortable, that accommodate the finger length discrepancies. Let's squeeze to get more muscular action out of it because it's more of like an overcoming isometric. So it's a little bit more muscular. So a little side on that is we've tested a bunch of fingers. And when we do the yielding isometric, so I'm fingers on a ledge, I'm pulling down with my large muscles, and basically my fingers are trying to get stretched open. That number is really high, but we take the same position and we just squeeze. We're seeing like a 20, 30% drop, but the fingers are doing the same thing. Why does that happen? And we don't have a perfect answer right now. It's a lot of revolving around like passive tension, the unique way the muscles interact eccentrically, molecules like tighten that add passive tension there too. But we're getting all of this passive help. which means it's loading the connective tissue more, and we're getting that, which is great. We want all of the efficiency in the world to get from the bottom to the top and not fall off. But if we do that on the wall, and we do that on the wall, we come off the wall, we do it more, we do it more, and then we get the tweaks and the golfers or hockey elbow, and we're like, oh, why am I so surprised that I'm getting overuse injuries when I'm doing the same thing? But the issue is it doesn't really look the same, but it is. And so we have to almost split hairs a little bit and say off the wall, nothing little or weird to get your fingers all jumped up, big, large, comfortable edge. We're not going to like hang there a lot with our body weight. We're just going to squeeze, and we're trying to complement that. And it's kind of like the zone 1, zone 2 thing where, okay, you've got 3 hours of ice time. Cool. You're getting that stuff. Let's give you the hard stuff so you're ready for game time. But why do the same thing all over again? And not just a sense of, quote unquote, wasting time where you could be getting that zone 4 and complementing zone 2, but you're also using the body in the same ways. And we want to be prepared, but we don't want to overdo. And that's a hard balance. But I think better understanding the joint actions and the way our body interacts with our sports, the contraction types we use, the duration we use them is really helpful, because when we're writing programs, kind of like traditional CFSC style, you want to put it day 1, day 2, and you want to make sure your recipe really complements each other. You don't want to do knee dominant, knee dominant, knee dominant, knee dominant, knee dominant. That wouldn't be a good program. So why would it be the same for other physiological factors in our sport?
Absolutely. Can you just take a step back for maybe newer listeners, or because we've talked about this before on the show, but can you just kind of go over, give a couple of examples of overcoming isometric and yielding isometric, just so people know where you're coming from?
Sure, absolutely. So a yielding isometric is like a wall sit. So for the general population, if you're just sitting on a wall, you're supporting yourself, wall sit for like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, eventually you're going to start to go down. Your quads and your body is resisting falling down to the ground. An overcoming isometric is maybe if you take like a traditional back squat or barbell and you go up into a squat rack and you're trying to lift up into maybe pins that are stopping you. Or maybe you have a buddy and they're holding you down by the shoulders and you're trying to push up. What it is an overcoming isometric is like an effort against an immovable object. And a yielding isometric is the similar style thing, but you're just holding it in space. I like to say in our courses and stuff, if you run the exercise example to infinity, a yielding isometric, you will move. In an overcoming isometric, you just get tired and stop. And so another example is if you do a pull-up and you pull up halfway and you hold, you're slowly going to fall back down, yielding isometric. But if I stand underneath it, I have a hand overhead, I grab the pull-up bar and I try and do a one-arm pull-up, but I'm not going anywhere because I'm not strong enough, overcoming isometric. And the cool thing about these is, as far as like sports performance science, like they're all really, really good. They really maximize muscular recruitment, neurological. They translate into dynamic movements because there's always an isometric component into movement, whether it's like you're running and you have that eccentric moment before you push forward, or you go to hit someone in football. Like all these things are really nice, but they're also really useful. And maybe, chatting towards the hockey elbow scenario, because when it comes to like range of motion or speed, sometimes those variables come into play and they are not so good when it comes to like angry tendons. Like sometimes you want to just use half the range of motion. Sometimes you don't want to use any range of motion at all, and you want to be able to throttle your efforts. Because most times, doing nothing is not the best way to start to cultivate the healing process, and especially the psychological pain sensitivity process. So if I have like an angry elbow that I got from pulling up, maybe I don't do pull-ups really fast because, ow, that hurts. But maybe I do just go under the pull-up and I hold. I'm like, oh, elbow feels pretty good. That's great because we're speaking to the tissue, we're speaking to the muscle, the tendon to be like, hey, this is okay. You have to use force in order to reorganize and create that healing and strengthening process. But we're doing so in ways that don't piss off the elbow as well, which is the smart way of going about it. Because if you continue to exacerbate and have this recurring pain, the brain takes note of that. Your brain is your overprotective mother, and it goes, nope, that's hot, that hurts, we're not doing that. And so we want to have that conversation with our body as quickly as possible, as most appropriately as possible too. Also, disclaimer, personal training coach, strength coach, not a doctor. Don't just take this and run with it. But hopefully most people would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go kind of the origin of this conversation was about this idea into other sports
Mhm.
as well, and that grip training in other sports is missing some of those key aspects. So can you kind of start to touch on what are some of those key aspects that we're
Yeah.
missing, and how should the people who are like, well, I don't want to wait, not waste time, but I
Yeah.
only have so much time. How much, what should I do for that if it's not a completely like the most important part of my training?
Yeah, sure. I think the traditional style of grip is still really useful. So you want to do your farmer's carries, you can do heavy pull-ups and dead hangs and hold. But if you're a sport that the hand opens up a little bit and your fingertips are getting in funky and weird ways, it might be useful to start to use the hand in different shapes to just bring more comprehensive training to your program. So for the baseball player, instead of always just holding around a foam roller, the wrist roller or the farmer's
Yeah.
carries, maybe we do open our hand up a little bit. And it can literally be as simple as if you wrap your hand around like a rogue rack and you can just squeeze it. Because the hand goes from this fist to open and the fingertips are working, we get more of the hand working and involved that's maybe kind of hiding in the fist scenario. So we start to talk about the use of, rather than the FDS tendon, which tends to flex the knuckles and really the hand at the MCP joint, which is this punching someone knuckle. So we have
Yep.
the knocking knuckle, which is the PIP. We have the punching someone knuckle, which is the MCP. And then the little fingertip at the very end is our DIP, so the most distal. So not to get too physiological here, but those things matter because the way we use our hand says, hey, one tendon and muscle, I need you to work a little harder. Or, hey, other tendon, you're in a bad position to work. You don't have to work. It's going to get this. And so if we live our life just doing the same hand shape, we only strengthen the thing that is required for that. And we don't get to strengthen the other stuff that might be available when we open our hands. And again, this is really important for sports that have to open our hands. So your jiu-jitsu, your football grabbing a jersey, your OCR, that you go from grabbing a pipe to a rock climbing hold, and then a pipe, and then a rock climbing hold. So these
Yeah.
things require a variety of hand positions, which open up opportunity for a variety of different muscles to be involved. And so backtracking to like maybe programming, even for like climbers, an example climbing program that I write for everyone from beginners to like professional climbers is after we're done our warm up. And so a warm up can be like you're on the air bike for 5 minutes, getting the body going. Then you go through your movement prep. So you're squatting and lunging and pushing and pulling. We use the fingers a little bit to just get them going. So we're squeezing into something. We're using maybe climbing specific tools like a fingerboard or a hang board to get the fingers going. But then right at the end of the warm up for the hands, the only difference between a warm up exercise and a strength training exercise is the intensity. So if my hands are on something and I'm warming up, I just have 50% of my effort kind of going through it. Okay, let's strength train. Squeeze really hard, 3 seconds, 2, 1, and relax. Do that for a set or two, 3 to 5 reps. Boom, done. Strength training. And that could be a really quick and easy, like, I don't have a lot of time. How do I do better? Bang. Or if you're writing your programming and then we go through our traditional, we do a little bit of power, a little bit of big movement strength, and then some accessory, you can just swap in one of those accessories. So maybe instead of core, you can do that grip squeeze. That's all you need. It doesn't have to be like this complicated 20 or 30-minute extra hand specific stuff, but the value is the intensity. So making sure that you're working just as hard as you would your back squat, right? Because if you want strong legs, you have to work this hard. If you want strong fingers, you have to work this hard. But the nuance comes in that changing the position, but also doing things that aren't super, super costly all the time. So in the OCR and climbing world, that's like using your fingertips on really, really small things that you have to really organize
Yeah.
your hand. We're trying to get climbers away from that as their sole way of getting stronger because it's so stressful when the finger joints start to hyperextend. And it's not necessarily strength training at that point. It's more like strength mining. How much strength do you have already? And how do we get those tendons and that tissue in and around the joint to be stiff enough to like transfer that over? Strength training is how do we get that percentage of your max up all the time? And so what we're trying to do is get them to use larger implements, anything that basically, if we think back to that little fingertip joint, that will cover the joint probably all the way to that knocking knuckle. And that way the joint can't hyperextend. So there's no extra cost. It's like, why would you want to work at end range of your elbows all the time if you're hypermobile? That wouldn't be a great idea. We might want to get there eventually, but we want to really build this middle range strength and awareness and safety. And then let's get to the end ranges because, yeah, we need to get exposed to it, but we don't want to live there all the time. And so that's how simple grip training can be, is let's not only wrap our hands and make a fist around thing, let's open up the hand a little bit and get the fingertips involved. And let's make sure that when we get the fingertips involved, we don't do so that makes the joints like achy and angry all the time. So we back up the size a little bit. That allows the hands to work really, really hard, strength training, but also in ways that we can keep health and longevity in mind as well.
Cool. So come to mind for me would be, okay, you know, that means maybe, doing a set or two with some of dumbbell presses with fat grips, maybe some pulls with a towel. We have the assisted pull up. We actually have those little rock climbing, on our pull up. So having a set of those, right, to start out with, maybe the carries are with some, Olympic plates, a 10-pound even, where we're squeezing, right? Squeezing through there, right? So just right now for the average strength coach, we can throw and what you were talking about, almost like doing a tri-set, and the third exercise is, instead of, maybe a core exercise or a stretch, it might be something for the grip. Just that's an easy way, low barrier for entry with some of this grip stuff.
Right. And it can even be strategically like a fourth set as like a potentiating thing, which just came to mind. So you mentioned like the pinches and all these things. To maximize the strength out of the hand, though, we might want perhaps like a more stable position. So sometimes if I'm like pulling or moving, it gets a little funny for the hand to squeeze. So I might just like stand, and in that rogue rack example, I just squeeze it really, really hard. Or I take the plates and I just squeeze them really, really hard. And I'm just trying to maximize that effort, 3 to 5 seconds, do a couple sets. But that might be fun to do. Like, you go to the thing, I'm squeezing these tools or a rogue rack, then I go farmer's carry. And so the 2 or 3 reps of those squeezes is not incredibly fatiguing, but it's strength training. The 10 or 20 seconds it takes to go find the fight, now I'm potentiated, my grip's better, and all of a sudden I walk a little further. So there's some like unique ways you can kind of creatively add this to your program. And the cool thing is it doesn't take a lot of time. So you can just add these things. It's more about getting the intensity right and getting the fact that the fingers are being used appropriately.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right, though. It's funny because right now, as I'm going through the rehab for the hockey elbow, I've been my Dr. Crooks has been he's been having me hold up that like a 10-pound Olympic plate.
Man.
That's what kind of made me think of it. And in a certain position, right, as I'm hanging down, while my clients are doing some deadlifts or something. So
that's perfect.
Kind of just doing that while they're but yeah, I think like you said, for example, I worry sometimes I don't pair, my heavy deadlifts with pull-ups because I feel like it's too much on the grip, right? For those. So this is not something that's going to completely like, oh, you just messed up. You're making your deadlift. You want to get stronger in your deadlift, or you want to start getting some pull-ups. You shouldn't have paired them. It's just like you said, maybe more of looking at it more like a potentiation piece.
Especially under the umbrella of peak force or max strength. What some sport, even climbing, and what some sports are recognizing though too, is peak force is really cool and max strength is really cool, but capacity and endurance is probably the most sports performance enhancing thing. And this showed up in a paper in jiu-jitsu. It shows up in climbing all the time, obstacle course racing. You're using your hands more than one time. And so that would probably be the only time I would not pair thing with. So the difference would be, okay, we squeezed it for 3 to 5 seconds, relax. Now what we're going to do is squeeze until failure. And that might take 30, 40, 50 seconds. That's going to be a little bit fatiguing. If I do that and then I hop on a deadlift, that might just pop out of my hands. Yeah. So we don't want to do that thing. But the 2 or 3 seconds is not going to be getting in the way of anyone. Now, if this is the first time you're doing it with someone and it's super new, that's fine. Slowly, progressively sprinkle it in. But if you're doing strength training for the hands, it's just it's like shaking someone's hand really hard for the first time. You could use your hand afterwards, right? That's about it. But then if we're looking at how do I increase the endurance of my finger flexors or my hand strength or the capacity, that's a different animal. And that might have to be its own exercise where it would be a leg, the endurance part of that, and then a mobility or a core. So it has its own space to actually
Yeah.
recover.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, depending on how important it is in that for what you're doing, if they're injured, if they're not injured, how much, if they're practicing that day, et cetera. And you did say there's a lot of lessons around tendons and ligaments. We've talked on this show a lot about that recently with, Jake Tura's stuff and the kind of the knee stuff. And then, so you said a lot of lessons around tendons, ligaments, and tendinopathy in rock climbing that would translate to other sports as well. And you might have actually answered some of that along the way today, but can you specifically address that?
Sure. Yeah. If Jake was on here, you probably got the best version of this conversation already. But what the most common injuries in climbing tend to be around the connective tissue. They tend to be around the ligaments and the capsules of the fingers, and especially these connective tissue things called pulleys, which if you're a fisherman, it's kind of like the metal thingy that holds the wire really close to the rod. And so these structures keep the tendon really close to the finger for anatomical purposes, like you don't want the tendon popping out of your skin, but also for leveraging and things like that. And so what it tells us is that these things get hurt the most, and we reflect on the histories and the medical histories and climbing histories of those climbers. They tend to just have this excessive volume issue. They tend to be climbing a lot. There are certain grip types that show up more often than not that are more injurious. So something really, really small where I have to hyperextend my joints to leverage on it is going to be pretty stressful. Certain grip types that increase the leverage, or sorry, the moment arm to the pulley, so it adds more torque and more stress. When climbers use a interesting set of hand positions, so if I stick two fingers into a little hole and my other things are moving, that induces almost like if you imagine ripping a paper in half, a shearing force inside the palm. So that is what is typically with lumbrical injuries and whatnot. And so what this tells us is to understand that unique stresses are important and that we don't want to spike any one of these stresses randomly at a time. This relates to like running. I was consulting with a college athlete who was a field hockey player, and she got into track and then ran a 10K trail race, and her Achilles started to hurt. So she came in, she's like, Collin, what's going on? I'm like, that you did that when your body was used to running flat. Like, you're not weird or broken or dysfunctional or this and that. Like, don't spike something out of the ordinary, because a hill on your Achilles is way more stressful walking. Now you're going to run up it. And so little things like that is we just keep aware of what variables are we controlling and slowly progressing in our programs. And when something does go wrong, like my elbow hurts after some time on the ice, how many slap shots were you taking? How many per week? How many per month? Did you have some weird time off, like a sickness or anything for more than 2 weeks, and you came back and you did the same thing? So little things like that help us just reflect back on what's going on with that, because tendons need a lot longer time to kind of catch up to the change timeline ability that muscles and coordination have. Like when you get good at something, whether it's skill or split squat, you learn how to do it first. So coordination happens. Then the muscular adaptations occur, but then the tendons and the bones and the structural integrity things will catch up. Will catch up later. They're just not as physiologically resourced to change as fast, and that's fine. And that's why in the running world we have like the 10% rule, where we don't change any variable of speed or elevation or mileage by more than like 5 or 10% week to week and even phase to phase, because oh no, excuse me, my knee hurts or my Achilles is hurting now. It's always the white connective tissue that tends to put the check engine light on first. And it's usually a too much too soon or not enough preparation time. And so the opposite is true too when it comes to underdoing it. Like if you have a program and an off-season training and you only do slow strength training and you don't do any plyometric sprinting work, you throw your athlete into the season, they're also really at risk to get hurt because you didn't prepare the body to handle those
Yeah.
things. But you can also overdo the plyometric program too. So it's a really tricky thing. Some other things that are fun that climbing has taught us is, if we get climber's elbow, which is your tennis elbow, all that kind of stuff, it tends to happen with the volume. And when climbers get achy or hurt, they tend to go back to easy things because easy things will be better than hard things. However, climbing on big, easy things extends the amount of climbing you can do. It extends the amount of reps you do. And it actually adds to that overuse where, funny enough, like outdoor climbers and climbers at like higher levels that climb on smaller fingertip things only don't tend to have too much of the climber's elbow. It's only the ones that can really wrap their hands on juggy or hand gripping things like a pull-up bar, because now the stress will tend to go to the shoulder and the elbow. Whereas the climber that's only using fingertip things, the fingertips are the things that get hurt, but also the things that get tired, let go, and you're done. And so it tells us to be careful about defining easy and hard and progressive and regressive when it comes to helping people manage aches, pains, and injury, but also how to avoid these things. And then the final thing is that how you go about using it too matters when it comes to tendons liking like fast versus slow things. So we kind of talked about a little bit with the pull-up bar. Like if you're doing fast things and running and jumping and fast pull-ups and you go, ow, doesn't mean you can't use the limb, but maybe we do it in a slower way, or we do it in a holding isometric or yielding isometric way. We allow the body to continue to heal and get better and strong, but in ways that don't really piss it off a lot. And little things like compression into the tendons are a thing too. So if you have an achy elbow and I take my thumb and I jam into it, probably not going to feel good. If I have a achy Achilles and I push into it, and like Achilles dorsiflexion angle increasing is compression. But in climbers, when we hurt our undersides of our fingers, sometimes again they go, oh, I need to climb on easier things. Well, those easier things, if you can imagine like a pull-up bar, jam into the finger in the underbelly. And that doesn't feel so good. And it actually kind of prolongs the timeline that this climber is getting over feeling better. And that can also translate into the weight room too, where sometimes people get injured enough where like holding a barbell hurts. And so we have to modify around that to give their fingers some time off and learning how to bring back that volume, because we want to be able to do those things. But sometimes we have to know that, fingers that are angry don't like a lot of speed sometimes. They don't like shock loading and they don't like compression. And it just helps us think through these problems rather than have a guessing and checking. We want to have a more educated process on that.
With the, tendon, ligament stuff, which again, you're going to see a lot in your sport, in the climbing. Are those injuries, do they tend to take a little bit longer? Like, I feel like with my, with the hockey tennis elbow, it is taking some time because it's not just muscular. If it was, I could probably, he was doing some ART on it, et cetera, right? And that I could still feel it. And it's gotten a lot better, right? I'm almost there. It's been 4 weeks, no hockey, I haven't trained a lot. I've been doing some stuff here and there, but I haven't been doing a ton. I have some rehab stuff with like the TheraTube, right? I'm doing some eccentric work, but other than that, haven't been doing too much. Does it seem to take longer with these? We kind of need to, I know injuries are all going to be different, but the ligament tendon does seem to be like, hey, you better be careful because I don't want to go back out, because you mentioned slap shots. We were doing one-timer slap shots. That was the tip of the iceberg for me.
Yeah.
That's when I really felt it. Obviously, I've been using it for the last 11 months, playing a couple times a week, etc. So do these tend to take a little bit longer? We need to kind of be a little bit more careful.
Yeah, for sure. And unfortunately, I think it stems back to just their physiologically structuring and resourcing. So a muscle just has more blood flow and more innervation and things like that. And these tendons and stuff just don't. They just take a lot more moderate efforts, because if you give it way too much, you can't expedite anything, but you definitely can't expedite like a tendon or a bone thing. It just takes months and months and months.
Yeah.
There's like a cool research observation about like an Achilles tendon over the course of, it took like 12 weeks for some like symptomatic things to start to improve, even though when they imaged it, like still looks a little wonky. And so that's where it's really confusing too, is because just because something looks bad under a microscope doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be symptomatic or problematic. But it's all too about getting the function back and getting the symptoms back, because you can have a really, really healthy tendon, but if your mind is like, yeah, I don't want to do this. I work with a lot of post-op ACL athletes too with the return to play. And one of the biggest stages is not that they're comfortable single leg squatting anymore, but they want to move and they want to jump and their brain is allowing them. And so fun little tips and things I've done is like, instead of a random organized warm up, we'll play like a little pickleball or something. And they're at this end stage where it's like safe to do. And they start to play and they're like, oh, I'm moving again, because it wasn't their sport. And so you can have these moments, but it just speaks to the fact there's a huge psychological component when it comes to these things too. But long story short, yes, unfortunately, achy apathies and ligaments and tendons are going to take a little bit more time, especially because, weird things that you think wouldn't add to the sensitivity or add to your recovery timeline do. So it's the climbers that go climb easy stuff. It adds more time to their timeline. It's going out and not recognizing that, kind of like back to the bucket theory where, okay, slap shot hurt, I'll just, reduce or stop slap shotting, but then I'll go do a bunch of manual work, or I go to work on a farm, or I do a bunch of this stuff. Like the elbow is still seeing that, or I go to work out and I'm doing pull-ups, we're still seeing all that load. So all that load is still going into the stress bucket, and it's
Sure.
kind of really identifying that stuff. I work with a lot of people
Yeah.
that have multiple different things that they're using their hands. That's really, really hard to work with. People that come with elbow tendonitis and hey, my job that supports my family is working up on these power lines and I'm working with high power tools that are vibrating and heavy. I'm like, okay, we got to figure out how to, can you get your buddy to do some help with you? Like, it's really hard because
Yeah.
all of those environmental factors really, really matter.
I agree with that 100% because I did know the slap shot was the thing that put me over the top, but I told Tyler, I said, yeah, when I go back, I'm really just going to focus a lot on skating, maybe some stick handling, because the stick handling was fine. There are some wrist shots, snap shots. Those I can kind of feel a little and know that they're there, So for me, I'm like, okay, no shooting for when I do go back. So to your point earlier, just kind of easing into it. Don't just go right back and expect to do your thing. And also, like I've been doing. I was doing some David Weck rope flow type stuff because you're moving all around in different ranges of motion, and it's just the rope, so there's not like this overuse load, but it does get the wrist going in different positions, the elbow, the shoulder, all of them working together. So for me, I felt like that felt pretty good, and didn't kind of bother it.
Yeah, that's good. It's definitely just warm up, get it moving, get it feeling good. But then there is a threshold of like easy that would add on to those reps of, I don't want to call them like garbage mileage, but in climbing we
Yeah,
have the term like garbage mileage, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
like that kind of thing. So you have to be a fine line behind identifying garbage mileage and then things that are actually helping me feel better.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a lot of there's no pressure or stress on it. Like I'm not like a slap shot, or for example, I wouldn't go hit golf balls right now, right? Because
Right.
that would aggravate it more. Especially that's when golfers get tennis elbow on that left arm. So I wouldn't do that right now.
Right.
Kind of the same movement. Just go back. You did talk a little bit about warm ups,
Mm.
but really more for general, like, hey, you can throw this in at the end. But what would you like to see for a warm up? Because I think you did a video on some warm ups as well. But what would you like to see minimum for everybody from a really a grip strength, a forearm, et cetera, warm up?
I think going back to the testing, there's the overhead, there's the
Okay.
finger-based things.
Yeah.
So a really comprehensive warm-up for the upper limb climbing or grip-based athlete is making sure that the shoulder, elbow, and fingers are all getting an appropriate load. And I think it just starts off knowing the general principles of warming up, right? General to specific, slow to fast, simple to complex. And so we might have our climbers hold themselves halfway in a pull-up for a moderate intensity. So maybe their toes are on the ground for 5 or 10 seconds. They relax. They're also gripping into that slowly and releasing slowly. They're not like jumping onto it really, really fast because it might exacerbate maybe some achiness. But then after a couple of reps of that 10-second stuff, then we pick our feet off the ground and then we hold for 5 seconds. And then maybe we'll end with our feet on the ground and just pulling as hard as we can. So we go on easy and then moderate durations, and then we slowly ramp up intensity, the duration drops, and then we get really fast and snappy to get it. And that's a nice quick example of that. But then we would apply the same thing to the fingers. So the easier stuff and the simple stuff is anything that's like an open-ish hand. So if I'm gonna put my hand around a basketball, my fingertips are a little flexed. And then that's going to be a nice way to start warming up the hand, because it's very low stress to the tissues in the fingers. And I do the same thing. Maybe my feet are down and I do like 10 or 15 seconds, do a couple and bring it back in. Then I'm going to pull a little harder, pull a little harder. But another notch I can turn for intensity is going from that like basketball shape. I can bend at my knocking knuckles at 90 degrees. Now the moment arm gets a little better, it's more stressful, but now I'm ready for it. And so now I'm going to like squeeze into something. 10 seconds for a couple first, then harder and harder to the point I want to get to like 3 seconds really, really hard. Like you're going to squeeze someone's hand and snap it in half. That's the intensity you want to go. But it starts off with low cost options. So an open arm pull up and then getting into maybe like 90-ish degrees, easier hand positions, and then working your way to the more costly thing. But you want to feel like the joints have gone from like cold and stiff to warm and fluidy. And you want to feel like you're giving a lot of effort and you're not psychologically worried about it either. And another flashback to those force gauges and those tools that we use, those, if our climbers and clients have them, are fantastic because you can literally watch your max strength go up and up and up. And if it gets really close to your previously assessed max, you know you're pretty ready to go. But you can also test those things daily if you wanted to, and you can see the daily fluctuations, which you'll know you'll have. But sometimes you see a big spike downwards. You're like, maybe I don't have it, and you can use it for like a readiness tool as well. But in a sense of a warm up, that's what we want to see. What we don't want to see is just jump on the wall or just go into the thing or just go for the run, right? Because the body's going like, whoa, what's going on here? And so we want the fluid going in. We want the heart rate elevated. We want the blood flow going into the joints and the muscles. And then we want the force to slowly be risen over time. And that allows the muscles to be tuned, the brain to be tuned, the tendons and ligaments to get a little fluid in there and have a little bit more compliancy. And it's just going to feel a lot better. And it's almost sounded like, we're getting to the old guy stage. We're like, don't forget your warm up, but it's helpful. It improves the comfort of the exercise and it can help the performance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. I'm really glad we did this. Collin, I appreciate you coming on and appreciate you reaching out for this and kind of putting this in my head. And like I said, it was kind of sitting there anyway, just thinking there's got to be, we're seeing a lot of these sports, like I said, OCR and ninja and rock climbing's become more popular. I remember I told you I went to the premiere of Alex Honnold. That was, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
At IMAX, it was so cool. But we're seeing more and more of that. And I know there's, like you said, there's a lot of lessons that we can gain from that. And that's why I wanted to get you on, especially because, you're not just a one-trick pony. You're working with everybody here. So, Collin, we really appreciate you coming on and talking about this.
Dude, thank you so much. And like I said, it's been a little mini dream come true to come on for the Strength Coach podcast. It's been in full circle. And I hope that the rock climbing lessons in our sports start to learn from each other, because it's, especially in the rock climbing sense, like the sport's growing. And so doctors and physical therapy, you're going to start seeing these finger injuries, and you're going to have to know that there's a total nuance when a kid comes in with a growth plate injury or an adult comes in with an A2 pulley, and OCR and Jiu-Jitsu, if all these things are going to happen. So I think when we start to accumulate good knowledge together, we can help a lot more people. And so again, thank you so much for having me on. I always love sharing my passion, the new rock sports. I would say I don't do ball sports anymore. I'm more of a rock climber, but it's been a great time. And again, thank you for allowing me to share.
All right.